Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Chasing Shadows, a podcast series designed to supplement our church-wide study of the book of Ecclesiastes here at the Austin Stone. My name is Ross Lester, and I'm joined as ever by my ever-present and ever-hopeful co-host, Val Hamilton. I know that many of you are listening to this on audio, but if you were watching the video, she's fully representing today in burnt orange.
That's right.
Really looking the part, and also in burnt orange. Is a good friend and one of the congregation pastors here at the Austin Stone, Mr. John Yang. John, welcome to the show. Hookem.
Yeah,
I think I'm supposed to say.
Yes.
Tell our listeners a little bit about you, maybe in the categories of kind of your story of origin, your family, your time at the Stone, and then what you currently do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. A little bit about myself. I was originally born in Taipei, Taiwan. And so my family immigrated here to the United States when I was 8 years old, straight to Houston, Texas.
Wow.
So I basically grew up here in Texas. I still remember learning how to speak English here.
Man,
it was tough. It was hard. And I went to school here at UT. And that's where I met Jesus. So I didn't become a believer until freshman year in college.
Is that like a campus ministry?
Yeah, Campus Crusade for Christ. Someone met me at the Jester Lawn and shared the good news with me.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it. And graduated and then got married a couple years after. So I'm married to my wife, Ime. We've been married for 21 years now. So we have 4 kids. Rachel's a senior in high school, so she's getting ready. Miracle if she goes to UT. It's so hard to get into UT now.
I could not get in right now. I don't think.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's so hard.
Apparently anyone can get into A&M. That's just what I feel.
That is so true. I have heard that.
Yeah. But we're holding strong.
That's right.
Praying for a miracle. Ethan is a sophomore in high school. Caleb is in 6th grade, and Audrey's in 4th grade. And my family and I, we moved to Austin 10 years ago for the Austin Stone. I was in the corporate marketplace for, 18 some years. I was living the dream, and it's part of my story. I never thought that I was going to be in ministry, and especially in the capacity that I'm in right now. But God really pulled me out of a world and a job that I idolized way too much. And he pulled me here 10 years ago, and now I'm serving as a congregation pastor at the St. John congregation, which is always so awkward to say with my name. St. John it's not after me.
Oh, wow.
You are the
I actually hadn't thought of that.
So
But
every week I'm like, guys, yes, it's not.
Are you the St. John?
Yes, I get that
here.
part about.
Amazing.
It's because we are on St. John Avenue, just so everyone knows. So I started 10 years ago at the Stone as a communications director, and 4 years into this, our lead pastor just asked me to consider a role in pastoral ministry, and that was a huge change for me. I've never thought that I would ever be called to this because, one, I'm not qualified. I didn't go to seminary, and I never thought that I would even be on stage delivering God's word. But man, where I'm at in life now, I am so confident of where the Lord has me. It's not easy. And I need my community to remind me that this is where God has you. And sitting in rooms like this, I'm just so grateful, really, really grateful to see what the Lord has been doing, especially in my life, and how he continues to use my story to impact other people. Yeah.
Oh, John, I'm so encouraged by your humility. I love getting to serve alongside you and to do kind of this life of ministry together. I know there's been elements of the congregation pastor role where you've had to stretch yourself and push yourself, and thanks for doing that so well. One area, though, where we're kind of always trying to catch up with you, as the rest of the CPs, is just in your pastoral proactivity. You're just so proactive with your congregation. I've always loved that, and I've learned a lot from that. This last Sunday, the text spoke about like a proactive heart of a worshiper. It spoke from Ecclesiastes 5 about something being meaningless, which is religious activity without taking seriously the reality of God, right? So like having a small God, especially in the corporate gathering of the saints. As you kind of sat through that text and worked through it as we prepped through it to preach, and as you sat under it this last Sunday, What are some of the things that you were thinking for your congregation of how do they obey that text when it says, guard your steps as you go to the house of God? How do you prepare yourself for worship? What are some of the things you thought, oh, here's what I wish my people would do week in, week out to guard their steps as they go to the house of God?
Yeah, that's good. Good, Ross. Before I even answer that question, I will say, sitting under this text and your preaching, it really brought me back into my childhood. Growing up in Taiwan, we were a Buddhist family, and it's such a strong cultural religion there, and I remember that so clearly. We had to do so many things in order to worship. And we had to tell ourselves like, hey, if you don't do this right, then you can't meet God. If you don't pray to a certain God for a certain peace or a certain joy, you can't come before him. And this weekend when I was sitting there, I was like, gosh, if people just have a great understanding of Jesus and the freedom that we have, I mean, like the freedom that I have now, just knowing that I don't have to think that I got to do certain things in order to achieve something more. Right. And I know that especially in this world, that's what we're all after, right? Like there's things that we feel like in order to do this, in order to get here, this is what we got to do. But when it comes to the spiritual side, this is where I am so thankful that someone introduced me to Jesus and that there's just so much freedom in not having to do that. And there's so much grace that abounds. And I love what you said about like, hey, this is, you send on Saturday, but you come here where there's mercy and grace that will meet you here.
Sin shouldn't keep us from the house of God. It should drive us to the house of God, right? Because that's where mercy is.
Yes. Yeah. And so I love that. And it just reminded me how grateful I am to be rescued from that.
It's so true what you're saying. Like there's a sense of all this pressure that you can feel in other faiths where you are the one that has to make your way back to God. And yet we have this gift of a faith where actually Jesus as God came and did the thing we couldn't do, which is so different.
And let's be honest, I still struggle with that.
Sure.
I mean, being a believer for 25 plus years now, I mean, even being in ministry and knowing that work was my idol before, it's easy for me to think, okay, God, you'll love me more, right? If I do this in ministry. Yeah. And so I even catch myself in moments of life. So it's such a great reminder. And
that's so good, John. So much of life is about tension, right? Being able to hold two truths in tension.
Yeah.
And so the guard your steps shouldn't be performative. This is not what our right standing before God is about.
Right.
But bearing that in mind, then it shouldn't make us casual.
Right.
That's right.
Bearing in mind that God has done so much to provide us mercy.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we ought to guard our steps, not to gain his approval, but because we have it.
Right.
That's right.
Not to earn it, but to respond to it. In a way.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That's such a good reminder. Good.
Yeah. And so it's, for me, even being called to this season of leading a congregation at St. John, like for me, I send out my weekly email for them. And just this morning, there's 2 challenges that I have for them, right? It's just, there's so many practical steps that we can all try to do, but then it becomes overwhelming.
Sure.
And I think the first thing that, like you said, just go, just come and don't come in a way where you feel like, okay, I gotta have all my messes all together.
Yeah.
And I gotta show people that everything's okay. I gotta hold it together before I go. Just come. And one of the things that I think we often missed out on as a church is that if we're late to worship, I mean, meeting Jesus starts when service starts. It doesn't start when, like you said, some of these songs or even into the main point. And I get the fact that there's circumstances and life challenges that's going to come our way.
Right.
But in so many other aspects of our life, we do get prepared.
Yeah. We allow for that.
We allow for that. And going to the game this Sunday, I mean, this past Saturday, I'm like, we got to get there on time so that we can be able to enjoy all these things.
Right.
Why are we not doing this for our King Jesus? And so those are things that I think, one of the things that I really encourage our people to really think through is just make an effort.
Yeah.
And think about why you're going to church.
I'll just jump into. I feel like that even as a mom, where you've got little kids, you're trying to get out the door, and it's you're arguing about which outfit to wear because this one has a giant stain, but it's the favorite one, and is that okay for church? And you're like, look, we're just trying to make it. And I know with so many families, even getting there late is like they're just so glad to have made it. And I think there's also this sense of like I can come in with all those distractions, so I'm still thinking about what I have to do when I get out. I'm still thinking about the conversation I need to have with my little girl Ruthie, because maybe I lost my temper about the wearing the Cinderella dress. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And I think just remembering, what is this day for? What am I coming to do? And just even walking into the worship, the place of worship with the sense of, oh yes, I am this creature that God knows all of the circumstances. He knows all of the limitations. He understands my frame. And yet he's invited me here to speak to me, right? What an incredible thing. And just even just getting there and saying, this is what today is about, orders me. But I will say it convicted me, because that's not how I'm coming in. And it was such a stark just reset for me of like, this is how I want to try and leave those distractions at the door.
Well, I mean, the people who can be at the most risk of this are people who are paid to be there, right? And so I said this in the sermon, but I'm a terrible congregant in a church service because my phone's always buzzing. Is it too loud, right? Is it too cold? Is it too hot? Do we have enough parking? Right. What's happening out there, right? Why do we choose this song? And the stuff's just all going on all the time, and you can actually forget that you've been offered this gift of grace. And here's where I think we take the fact that God is actually bigger than what we make him out to be, right? So he's omnipresent. So we take that amazing thing, but then we make it a casual thing in which we make him smaller.
Right.
So because we go, because he's omnipresent, then gathering with the saints in his presence doesn't really matter. Well, that's not true.
Right.
Not true. He still then invites us into this mysterious moment, right? Where his presence, though it was with you even as you were arguing in the car down 360 on the way there, manifests tangibly in a different way in the gathering of the saints. That's a gift available to you.
Yeah.
And we miss out on it when we come in so frazzled and late. And
that's right.
I know.
Yeah,
exactly. And then oftentimes we come to church and we sit there and I know I'm guilty of this, is that you listen to the word of God, and even you think about the songs and you're thinking, oh, this person needs to hear it.
Not me, though.
Right? Not me. Oh, this person
I've never done that, John. Never done that.
This person needs to hear this.
I've never had a long
do.
look at someone at point 3 of the sermon. No.
And so I was convicted of that. And I think the way that we have prepared for Ecclesiastes in this particular series, from week 1, I have this one question for my congregation when I send out this weekly email is, what adjustment are you going to make today?
It's good.
You.
Right. Specific.
Not anybody else. Don't tell people to make some adjustments. What do you need to make in light of what you heard and what you sang today?
Right.
Because we should anticipate a required adjustment, right? If you meet with God,
it's going to correct. It's going to shape. Right.
That gap between who you are and who he is going to lead to some change. It must.
Right.
And I think that's where I learned early on in my Christian faith is like, it's easy to think fear God is, oh gosh, there's this intimidation factor. But fear God is really, how do you allow the Spirit of the Lord to transform your heart?
Right.
Right? It's all about you. And I think in some ways, like we got to fully surrender that to the Lord.
Well, and something you said, Ross, that stood out to me in the sermon with fearing God, it was fear God and nothing and no one else. Like that second clause to say, it's not that we're not a fearful people. It's that we're fearing the wrong things and we're focused on being afraid of the wrong things, when really, in a sense, if we had a healthy, reverent fear of God, I think it would make other things seem so much less scary.
Yeah.
I think the restrictions of our English language don't help us, right? And so fear for us is a very negative word, because when we think fear, we think the emotion of being afraid.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
And we think, well, I don't know if in Christ that's how I'm supposed to respond to God, right? He's gentle and lowly and meek, and I can approach him, and he's made a way for me to know God as Father. And so we don't go, I don't want to be afraid of my Father, right? That sounds scary or abusive even in worst case scenarios. But it doesn't mean be afraid. To fear God, as the ancient understood it, was to view him rightly, to take him seriously, to give him his rightful place in the cosmos and then in your heart, right? The rightful place of worship. And I actually think, as I was working for the sermon, right, as the conclusion is God is the one you must fear, right? So God is the one you should view rightly. I've realized that, oh my goodness, the root cause of most of my being afraid in the world is because I don't view God rightly.
That's right.
And so then I'm afraid of everything else, of all of these other things, afraid of rejection and failure and all of these things. And it's because I don't fear him. I don't view him as he really is.
I like what you said, Ross. I think so many times, like in our moments of despair or even our cry for help, we think we've got to do something for God in order for him to make it right. Right? Like we got to do so many things. And that was the perspective I had in growing in my spiritual journey. And I will say that it wasn't until going through being here at the Austin Stone, even in the last 10 years of hearing the word preached and pointing us in reverence of God, really helped shape me to see, gosh, I had even though I know that I'm saved, but I really had a distorted view of God and thinking that this is what it's going to take, And I think one of the things that I would encourage our people too is like, hey, talk about this in your community. Like the things that you heard today, like, man, fearing God, I still don't get it. You hear all these conversations, but I still don't get it. Keep asking questions.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask questions because they think, but I should know this. I've been a Christian for 15 years and I still don't know it.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even view the ceremony, the ritual of the gathering of the saints as an opportunity to fear God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That's why we sing these big God songs.
Yes.
Because it reminds, that's reality. He's God. I'm not. And, and yet he loves me. Right?
Yes.
That's an exercise in the fear of God. And that's why we preach the way that we do, because we want to, let's view him rightly.
That's right.
As he's expressed himself through the word. That's an exercise in fearing God.
That's right. I went on a trip this summer where we did a climb up a waterfall, if you can believe it. I have one good knee, so it's not a great idea.
You're like an adventurer.
Yeah. John Murkison says he's an avid indoorsman, and that's typically me as well. But we took this giant climb. I was probably 100 feet up in the air. Now we're tethered in, but everyone around me wanted to just turn around and take in the view. And for me, I really couldn't. And I do have a fear of heights, but there was something about the vastness of looking out into creation and the recognition of how small I was that was kind of crushing to me. And I think that's, when I think about God, kind of similar, where you're like, when you really right size God, it should give you this sense of smallness, and it should give you this sense of humility and reverence. And what's crazy, but that a God that big and that powerful and that vast and mighty looks on you and knows you and loves you.
That's the key, right? So you get the duality in that moment of smallness, but security, safety.
That's right.
Beloved by that big God. That's the joy of the gospel.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and something you mentioned, Ross, that I thought was really interesting in the sermon was, it used to be when you would go worship in the temple, there were all kinds of cues that kind of took you out of the ordinary everyday life experience and put you in a worshipful moment, even from the architecture and the rituals. And so we don't have that, right? When you look up into the vast ceilings of Austin High School, it doesn't really transport you into the divine. So what do we do with that? What are the implications of kind of having some limitations on how it feeling sacred?
Yeah. I love the missional edge through which we've multiplied congregations at the Stone, which means that we've landed up in some facilities that the facility isn't designed to help you fear God, right? The facility is designed to just give you a space out of the Texas heat, which is a good thing.
Right.
But the facility isn't working with you, right? And so you can walk into an old cathedral and the facility is working with you. You can go into high church, and even the garments that those who are, overseeing the ordinances, that works with them. You go like, oh, this is sacred. I see this, right? Our guys are in polos that they bought from Costco and white sneakers, right? And so you don't have some of those reminders. Our temptation can be like, oh, those reminders then are the things we need, right? So what we need is stained glass windows, and what we need is the high vaulted ceilings, and what we need is robes and bells and smells. And some of that's quite alluring as I get older, right? I
go need a robe.
A robe wouldn't hurt, or like a building that doesn't look like a nightclub during the day, right? Like that would be quite nice. Like I like that, and I think we can grow in some of that. But that isn't the answer, but it is the obstacle for us. And so I think we need to be aware of the obstacle, and how much more then should we guide our steps as we walk into Austin High, or as we arrive at West Campus, which is the old server room of an Apple building, or at the St. John building, which is an old age home or care facility, right? That had been derelict and left to ruin. We don't have those cues. And so we need to work even harder to remind ourselves of what we're actually doing when we go to the house of the Lord.
That's really good.
And we must be honest, there are discontinuities. We aren't going to the temple.
Right.
We are the temple.
That's exactly right.
But I don't think we get to go in those discontinuities that say that then Ecclesiastes 5 has nothing to say to us. Right? So like the discontinuities between temple and church would be, I mean, I'm no expert on Solomonic temple practices, but I think we know enough from the time to know that the major discontinuities would be in terms of God's presence, right? Yeah. We don't have the Holy of Holies that we're going to gather in, right? We have a green room, which some people treat as the Holy of Holies, but largely just a place where people go to replenish their mints and coffee and chewing gum. But we carry the presence of the Lord with us. But again, that discontinuity then doesn't lead to a casualness. It should lead to, oh my goodness, the Holy Spirit dwells within me.
Right.
Well, then I should guard my steps.
Right.
I should prepare my heart.
How much more so?
Yeah. We don't go to offer sacrifices. We go to celebrate the sacrifice that has been made. But that doesn't let us off the hook. We don't then get to go like, oh, there's nothing for us to do. No, Romans 12 says, now offer your body, your whole life as a living sacrifice. And what does it say in verse 1 of Romans 12? It says, in view of God's mercy.
Right.
So because we aren't at the temple, because we know the mercy that we have in Christ, oh no, we offer more.
Right.
Not less, right? And we don't go to the temple to sit under Torah. We're not bound by Torah, right? But we do go to sit under the word and the fulfillment of Torah in Jesus Christ. So how much more, knowing the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that fulfills Torah, how much more should we guard our hearts and humble ourselves and be willing to listen as we go?
That's so good. Well, and even as you're saying that, there's these limiting factors we need to think about as we step into these worshipful spaces and things that those discontinuities that are the obstacles. And I think for some, it might be the architecture, the bells and smells, as you call them. But I think there are also some in our congregations who have experienced pain and have experienced hurt. So when they walk in that building, they're kind of starting at a relational deficit, or there's things that they're bringing into a sacred space that can be obstacles. And so what encouragements or words would you have for congregants who have experienced some woundedness in the church that might limit them in this way?
Yeah, I mean, we're all guilty of this. I'm just deeply saddened, with some of the ways that some of our people have experienced pain in trials. And not necessarily even here, but even in their previous churches and upbringing and stuff like that. And I know I've spoken to quite a few young singles of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, but I'm here. There's a lot of me that wants to eject and want to escape. But when I hear about this, gosh, I can just keep coming, but I feel like I'm kind of checking the box. And one of the things that I have just really trying to encourage these men and women that I've talked to is just, you just got to show up. You show up and God's going to show up. And you have to kind of let God take care of the past. And allow him to restore you for what he has for the future. Easier said than done, because sometimes if you don't feel it and you don't have anything tangible in front of you, it's not going to be easy. But this is where I feel like our community of believers can come and rally around people and to say that we're not going to let you fall. We're not going to let you just sit in the corner and stew in this way. We're going to come alongside you, and we're going to raise you up, and we're going to walk through whatever it takes to kind of get you to a point where, man, you can truly, fully experience God in that way.
Yeah, well, I think it was Zach Eswine's work on Ecclesiastes that first pointed out to me the assumptions baked into Ecclesiastes 5 is that church will always be a mixed bag, right? It speaks of those who offer the sacrifice of fools. And so all the way back to the first occupants of the Solomonic temple, there have been those who offer the sacrifice of fools, who preach and publicly offer the way of God, but then don't live under his law and command. And what encouraged me from Ecclesiastes 5 is, A, that's always been the case, right? But we're not defeatist in it. B, that God sees, and C, that God judges.
Yes.
It says, why would you do that and have God destroy the work of your hands, right? And reject the words of your mouth.
Right.
And so I think so much of the reckoning that we're seeing in evangelicalism at the moment, I think could be interpreted as, God's left the church. And there's certainly days when it feels like that. But it could equally be interpreted of like, no, God is doing what he promised. In Ecclesiastes 5, he's publicly exposing the sacrifice of fools. And what that means is he's creating a safer space for us where we will be not as hurt and wounded, but also he's creating safe spaces for our own hypocrisy, which we all bring in.
That's exactly right.
We'll all offer the sacrifice of fools in some ways.
That's right.
And he's creating a house of mercy in which we can still be safe.
I love that.
That's right.
Well, and in the meantime, while we all bring that hurt, there does seem to be this sense of, even in the face of maybe the faithlessness or the sacrifice of fools, what can we offer? Can we still be faithful even in the face of faithlessness or in the face of woundedness? And I think in some ways those offers of sacrifice are the sweetest to the Lord, when it really cost you so much to keep showing up, even when it's really hard.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true in real worship. Just the faith to keep showing up.
Just to keep coming. That's
What
right.
an amazing thing. Yeah. Well, friends, that's it for another episode of Chasing Shadows. As always, if you have questions and comments, please feel free to mail podcasts@austinstone.org. We love hearing from you, and glad to hear that for many of you this has been a helpful endeavor. But we'd love to hear the questions that you have from the sermon series or from some of these episodes. We'd also love to see you at one of our 6 congregations this Sunday, where you guard your steps as you go to the house of God and then enjoy the mercy that you find there. The text we'll be teaching this week is all about the poverty of wealth. And I reckon we all need to hear that. I know I certainly do. And so we hope, Lord willing, that we'll see you there. Otherwise, we'll see you right here next week.